Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka nabina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Welcome, brothers and sisters, to another installment of our weekly program, Analyzing the Address, where we revisit the week's khutbah, talk about it in a little bit additional detail, and allow you the opportunity, if you so choose, to provide any feedback and ask any questions you may have regarding the khutbah. And honestly, the last couple of weeks we have not had the program, and honestly my intention was to continue today with our segment on Riyadh al-Salihin. Take another one of the hadith from Bab al-Mujahada, the chapter of striving. But because of the importance of the khutbah and some of the information that obviously we were not able to cover given the time constraints, I felt it would be good if we went ahead and took this opportunity to go ahead and expand on the contents of the khutbah. So we'll be doing Analyzing the Address this evening. So this khutbah was regarding the imminent departure of the community's Imam. And as I said at the outset, I mentioned the ayah from Surah Al-Hashr, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاعْتَبِرُوا يَا أُولِي الْأَبْصَارِ. He says, and ponder the lessons in events and consider them reflectively, O possessors of insight. And we said that the message there in that ayah is, O Muslims, try to learn something from everything. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the khutbah, it was my desire that the sermon be educational, not confrontational. And obviously there truly is a lesson to be learned in all things, even disappointments, even circumstances that are not necessarily desirable. If we had our druthers and we were able to choose, we wouldn't choose what came to be. But even in those disappointments and even in those hardships and setbacks, there are lessons that can be learned. And so it was important for us as a community, it was important for me as an Imam, to talk about this subject so we could uncover some of those lessons. And I want to say that this particular issue of, Imams departing and how that comes to take place and how it affects so many people, the decisions that are made, how they are made, etc. Although I've heard Imams speaking to one another and their close friends about how unfairly they feel that they are often treated by the administrations of their respective communities, I personally have never heard an Imam present these issues to average everyday community members in a non-emotional way, aimed at educating them so that they can be the change Imams would like to see. And that's kind of what we wanted to do with this khutbah. And to me, this issue, or the educational piece related to this issue, is very similar to how people of color in this country have recently had to have some very candid and uncomfortable conversations with whites about race and systemic racism in this country. And these are conversations which many whites are not interested in having at first. But upon having them, they come to realize the reality of the problem of race, which they fail to realize. They fail to realize that it exists because of their privilege. And in their mind, and they'll even say this out loud, that these issues of race are overblown, that these people continually play the race card, they continue to play the victim, and to make mountains out of molehills, to basically try to get special privileges or advantages that they're not really entitled to and they're not really willing to work for. This is a common refrain among whites when it's mentioned to them that racism in this country is systemic, etc. Al-Muhim, but when they do have those uncomfortable, candid discussions with a person of color, and they are people who are objective and willing to listen, they come to learn that this systemic racism is a real thing. It is not a unicorn. It is not a Bigfoot. It's not something which is just made up the stuff that legends are made of. No, it's a real thing. And some of them, after having these conversations, have been moved to act and actively oppose racism and racist institutions. So, coming back to the point, as it relates to the issue that we were discussing, I don't think a lot of average, everyday mosque goers, or the Jummah crowd, the people who come for Salatul Jummah every Friday, I don't think they truly understand the Imam board dynamic and how poorly Imams are treated in many cases. Not all the cases, but in many cases. They don't realize that quite often Imams feel marginalized, they feel devalued, they feel that they are unappreciated. So if they don't realize that Imams feel this way, how can they be moved to do anything about it? How can they be moved to change something that they don't believe is wrong in the first place or is happening in the first place? So one of the purposes of the khutbah was, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, I wanted to change that. Or I wanted to play a role in changing that through this khutbah. So one of the things we said at the outset was that Imams are not a luxury. They are an essential part of successful Islamic